Carl Jung once wrote a sentence that continues to unsettle psychologists and philosophers alike. The tree that reaches to heaven must have roots that go down to hell. What he meant was not poetic exaggeration, it was a psychological law. The depth of your suffering determines the height of your transformation. The fall is not an accident, it is the price of ascent. What Jung did not fully warn people about is what happens after someone returns from that descent. When a person has been to psychological hell and survives it consciously, they do not come back as a repaired version of who they were. They come back as someone fundamentally restructured, and that change is deeply disturbing to those who only knew the wounded version. If you have spent years absorbing everyone else's pain, staying silent when your nervous system was screaming, bending until you almost disappeared, then this moment in your life is not about gentle healing. It is about rupture, a psychological earthquake that reorders power, boundaries, and identity. The people who hurt you, the ones who mistook your silence for surrender, are about to encounter something Jung documented, but few openly discuss: the return of the integrated shadow. When the shadow returns with consciousness attached to it, it no longer asks permission. It does not negotiate. It does not explain. It simply exists, fully owned. And that is precisely why it terrifies those who benefited from your self-abandonment. Jung would begin with a question. What happens when the person everyone used as an emotional dumping ground stops absorbing and starts reflecting? The world is filled with people who saw your kindness and mistook it for stupidity. They saw your empathy and assumed it made you weak. They watched you cry and believed they had broken you. They saw you retreat into silence and assumed they had won. Every manipulator, every emotional parasite, every person who fed on your patience made the same fatal mistake. They believed your wound was your identity. They assumed the hurt version of you was the real version. They had no idea they were watching a transformation in incubation. They were calling a caterpillar weak because it could not yet fly. Jung spent decades observing this pattern in clinical work. He described what many traditions call the dark night of the soul, a period of collapse that looks like destruction from the outside, but is actually a restructuring from the inside. Careers stall, relationships dissolve, identity fragments. The ego loses control. To observers, it appears like failure. To the psyche, it is preparation. What Jung discovered is that those who descend the furthest often rise the highest, but not in ways society celebrates. They do not return softer or more accommodating. They return precise. They return immovable. Think of the people who harmed you during your lowest point, the friend who disappeared when you needed support, the family member who minimized your pain, the partner who betrayed you when you were exposed and vulnerable. Every one of them shared the same belief, that your depth of feeling was a liability. They misunderstood silence. Jung understood that silence is not always submission. Sometimes it is observation. Retreat is not always defeat. Sometimes it is incubation. While others assumed you were collapsing, you were undergoing what Jung called the night sea journey, an archetypal descent found across myth and psychology. The hero is swallowed by darkness, stripped of identity, and remade. The critical detail is often missed. The hero does not return to reconcile with the darkness. The hero returns as someone the darkness can no longer consume. That is the difference between breakdown and transformation. You are no longer the person who was hurt. You are the person who cannot be hurt in the same way again. While you were quiet, something was happening beneath the surface. Jung called it shadow integration. The shadow is not evil. It is everything you were taught to suppress in order to be loved. Your anger, your refusal, your ability to say no without explanation, your willingness to walk away and let consequences unfold. For years, you locked these traits away because you were taught that good people do not get angry, do not draw hard lines, do not withdraw care. You were taught that your value came from endurance. So you endured. You absorbed other people's dysfunction. You made yourself smaller so others could feel larger. You carried emotional weight that was never yours while being criticized for moving slowly under its burden. Then something shifted. During your darkest period, you encountered your shadow and did not reject it. You did not push it back down. You listened. You looked at your anger and recognized it as protection. You looked at your boundaries and saw necessity, not cruelty. You looked at your capacity to disengage and saw wisdom, not coldness. Jung called this individuation. Becoming whole, by integrating what was split off, this is where the real transformation begins. Once the shadow is integrated, you stop operating from one side of yourself. You are no longer trying to be endlessly good, endlessly understanding, endlessly accommodating. You become complete, light and dark, soft and sharp, compassionate and immovable. And that completeness is what destabilizes those who relied on your incompleteness. The old version of you explained yourself. The integrated version does not. The old version apologized for existing. The integrated version does not negotiate its right to be here. The old version needed understanding. The integrated version does not require approval. This is why your return unsettles people who only knew you wounded. They built comfort on your shrinking. They grew accustomed to a version of you that absorbed their toxicity without resistance. They mistook patience for permission. They mistook empathy for availability. They mistook forgiveness for infinite access. And now something in you no longer responds the way it used to. You are not reactive. You are not defensive. You are not chasing clarity or closure. You are simply unavailable to the old dynamic. Jung observed that individuated people emit a different psychological presence. Not aggressive, not hostile, solid. There are no cracks left for manipulation to slip through. No buttons wired to guilt or fear. To those who relate through control, this solidity feels alien, threatening. They sense they have lost leverage. What they are experiencing is what Jung described as the mirror effect. For years, you absorbed projection. You were a sponge. They could mistreat you and watch you blame yourself. They could betray you and watch you rationalize it. They could neglect you and watch you minimize your needs. When you integrated your shadow, you stopped absorbing. You began reflecting. Now when they project, nothing sticks. Their manipulation meets calm refusal. Their guilt tactics dissolve into silence. Their gaslighting fails against your grounded certainty. This reflection forces them to see themselves, and most cannot tolerate that image. They escalate. They test. They provoke. They attempt to revive the old version of you. Not because they miss you, but because they miss power. They do not miss the relationship. They miss the hierarchy. And this is where your transformation becomes irreversible, because the part of you that once doubted itself is gone. And what remains does not need to fight, explain, or retaliate. It simply stands. They sense it long before they can name it. Something in you no longer responds to the old signals. The familiar emotional hooks no longer catch. The guilt trips fall flat. The drama fails to ignite anything inside you. This is when confusion turns into fear for them, because their entire way of relating to you depended on your willingness to react. They were not connected to you as a person. They were connected to your availability, your self-doubt, your endless capacity to absorb. Jung described this bond as participation mystique, an unconscious psychological entanglement where two people are not truly separate. In healthy relationships, this bond loosens over time, allowing both individuals to individuate. In toxic dynamics, the bond becomes parasitic. One person feeds on the emotional labor, validation, and tolerance of the other. For years, you were the one being fed upon. Your empathy was the supply. Your silence was the permission. Your patience was the fuel. When you integrated your shadow, you severed that bond. Not violently, not dramatically, cleanly. And what they are experiencing now is withdrawal. This is why they suddenly reappear, confused, nostalgic, or accusatory. This is why they say, "You've changed," with disappointment disguised as concern. They are not mourning the relationship. They are mourning the loss of access. They will test you. They always do. The unconscious needs confirmation that the old dynamic is truly gone. They may act as if nothing happened, hoping familiarity will pull you back in. They may provoke guilt, invent crises, or perform vulnerability to awaken your empathy. They may attempt anger, then charm, then victimhood, cycling through strategies that once worked. The old version of you would have felt the pull instantly. Your body would have tightened. Your mind would have rushed to explain, to clarify, to fix. You would have questioned your boundaries. You would have wondered if you were being unfair. You would have felt responsible for their emotions. The integrated version of you feels something entirely different. Nothing. Not numbness, not repression, but centered neutrality. A calm refusal that does not require justification. Jung called this being anchored in the self. You are no longer operating from the wounded ego that needs reassurance or reconciliation. You are operating from wholeness. This is the moment they realize something irreversible has happened. Because toxic individuals operate on a core assumption that everyone is playing the same game they are. They assume your kindness was strategy, your empathy was manipulation, your forgiveness was weakness. They project their psychology onto you. So when you disengage, they believe it is a tactic. They think you are waiting for an apology. They think you want them to chase. They think silence is a move. What they cannot comprehend is that you are not playing. You are not waiting. You are not trying to win. You are simply finished. And genuine indifference is the one state they cannot influence. They keep checking for signs, watching your life from a distance, asking mutual connections about you, hoping to hear that you are struggling, that you regret leaving, that you still need them. They create situations designed to provoke a response. Any response would reassure them that the bond still exists. But you are elsewhere now. Not hiding, not recovering, becoming. They are no longer central characters in your internal world, and that absence is what terrifies them, because it confirms the loss is permanent. Jung would have recognized the irony immediately. The very people who wounded you are the architects of the version of you they now fear. Every betrayal taught discernment. Every violation taught boundaries. Every dismissal taught self-trust. While they believed they were diminishing you, you were studying them, not consciously at first, but precisely. You know their patterns now. You know how they manipulate. You know which emotions they exploit. You know the words they use to evade responsibility. You know the timing of their apologies and the hollowness behind them. And they know, on some level, that you know. That awareness alone removes their power. This is why revenge is unnecessary. Exposure is unnecessary. Your indifference is sufficient. The knowledge you carry is power that does not need to announce itself. Jung used the word enantiodromia to describe this reversal, the tendency of things to transform into their opposite. The most giving person becomes selective. The most forgiving becomes discerning. The most accommodating becomes immovable. This is not bitterness. It is balance. This is what happens when empathy is integrated with wisdom, when compassion is paired with boundaries, when love is no longer confused with self-erasure. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming precise. You are not becoming cruel. You are becoming conscious. You are no longer abandoning yourself to maintain bonds with those who abandoned you first. And that is psychological evolution. Now understand this clearly. Their discomfort is not evidence that you have done something wrong. It is evidence that the old hierarchy no longer exists. Your refusal to tolerate mistreatment feels like loss to those who benefited from it. Their fear is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your burden. Their escalation is not an invitation. You have stepped out of the dynamic entirely. You are no longer on trial. You are no longer explaining yourself to people who never sought to understand you. You are no longer negotiating your worth. Jung believed the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not the version shaped by trauma, not the version molded by expectation, but the integrated self that no longer fragments under pressure. That is what is happening now. You are shedding every false identity you built to survive. You are releasing every trauma bond mistaken for loyalty. You are choosing yourself with the same intensity you once gave to others who never chose you in return. This is not selfishness. It is sovereignty. The wounded version of you was manageable. The integrated version is not. The wounded version sought validation. The integrated version generates it internally. The wounded version feared being alone. The integrated version understands solitude is preferable to diminishment. The wounded version thought love meant endurance. The integrated version knows love means mutual respect or absence. This is your return. Not loud, not vengeful. Final. You are not coming back to prove anything. You are not seeking closure from those who never offered honesty. You are not interested in being understood by people invested in misunderstanding you. You are coming back to yourself. And that return requires leaving behind anyone who only knew how to relate to your pain. Jung once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You have made that choice. You have chosen not to be a container for other people's dysfunction. You have chosen peace over performance. You have chosen wholeness over approval. So when they look at you now and feel something they cannot name, understand what you are witnessing. It is the moment a manipulator realizes their tactics no longer work. The moment a parasite loses its host. The moment someone recognizes that access to you has ended. That loss is theirs to carry. Your task is finished. You are no longer shrinking so others can feel powerful. You are no longer wounded to maintain their comfort. You are no longer explaining, defending, or justifying your existence. This is individuation in its final form. Not softness, not hardness, wholeness. And that is why your return changes everything. Not because you became someone frightening, but because you became someone free. What comes next is quieter than most people expect, and far more decisive. After the rupture, after the severing, after the final realization that the old world no longer has a claim on you, there is a period Jung described as consolidation. This is when your new structure stabilizes. Nothing dramatic happens on the surface, but internally, everything locks into place. You stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. You stop wondering if you were too harsh. You stop revisiting conversations in your head. The nervous system, which once lived in constant vigilance, finally stands down. This is the moment many people misunderstand. They assume healing looks like relief, mixed with sadness, maybe nostalgia, maybe longing. But what often arrives instead is clarity so clean, it feels almost impersonal. You do not hate the people who hurt you. You do not wish them harm. You simply see them accurately. And accuracy removes attachment. Jung believed that suffering only repeats when its meaning is not integrated. Once meaning is extracted, the psyche no longer needs to replay the lesson. That is why you are no longer pulled back. The lesson has been learned completely, not intellectually, but somatically. Your body knows, your nervous system knows, your unconscious knows, and because of that, the old hooks cannot reattach. This is also the stage where your life begins to reorganize itself around the integrated self. Choices become simpler, not easier, but clearer. You no longer debate whether something feels wrong. You trust the signal. You no longer override discomfort to keep the peace. You understand that peace maintained through self-betrayal is not peace at all. People may notice you are less available, less explainable, less eager to be seen as good. They may interpret this as distance or detachment. In truth, you are more present than ever. You are simply no longer scattered across other people's expectations. This is when new relationships begin to form, often slowly, often quietly. They feel different from what came before. There is no urgency, no emotional chaos, no need to prove or perform. Mutual respect replaces intensity. Consistency replaces drama. Safety replaces chemistry built on wounds. Jung noted that individuated people tend to attract fewer connections, but far more real ones. At the same time, you become deeply comfortable with solitude, not as a defense, not as avoidance, but as a chosen state. You no longer fear being alone because you are no longer fragmented inside. Silence does not feel empty. It feels spacious. Solitude becomes a place of calibration, not deprivation. This is where many people finally understand what Jung meant by wholeness. It is not happiness in the conventional sense. It is coherence. You think what you feel. You say what you mean. You do what aligns. There is far less inner contradiction. And because of that, far less inner noise. Your energy changes, not in a mystical way, but in a grounded one. You are no longer broadcasting need. You are no longer emitting unfinished emotional business. People respond to that. Some are drawn to it instinctively. Others feel uncomfortable around it and cannot explain why. Integrated individuals do not seek power, but they carry authority. Not authority over others, but authority over themselves. Jung warned that this stage can tempt people into spiritual inflation, the belief that they are above others or beyond human limitation. But true individuation does the opposite. It humbles you. You know exactly what you are capable of. Light and dark. You no longer need to posture as virtuous. You no longer need to defend your identity. You simply live it. This is also when forgiveness, if it comes at all, arrives without effort. Not forgiveness as reconciliation, not forgiveness as reopening access, but forgiveness as release. You no longer need the other person to understand. You no longer need an apology. You no longer need acknowledgement. The emotional charge is gone. Forgiveness becomes irrelevant because the bond it would repair no longer exists. From the outside, it may look like you moved on quickly. In reality, you moved through something most people avoid for an entire lifetime. You did not bypass the pain. You metabolized it. That is why it no longer controls you. Jung believed that when someone individuates, they quietly disrupt the collective unconscious. They become living proof that certain dynamics are not inevitable. That self-abandonment is not required for love. That loyalty does not mean endurance of harm. That empathy does not require self-erasure. Without preaching, without confrontation, simply by existing differently, you introduce a new possibility into the psychological field. This is why some people react with hostility or dismissal. Your presence challenges the unconscious contracts they are still living by. You remind them, without words, that they could choose differently. And for those not ready to face that truth, denial feels safer than growth. But your task is no longer to carry anyone else. Jung was clear about this. Individuation is not about saving others. It is about becoming real. What others do with that example is their responsibility. At this stage, your life becomes quieter but deeper. Goals change. Success is redefined. You measure progress by alignment rather than achievement. You value integrity over intensity. You choose environments that do not require armor. And perhaps most importantly, you no longer betray yourself in moments of pressure. When something feels wrong, you leave. When a line is crossed, you step back. When a relationship requires you to disappear, you let it go. There is no internal debate anymore. The decision is immediate, grounded, final. This is the ultimate outcome of the journey Jung described. Not enlightenment, not perfection, psychological sovereignty. You belong to yourself. The people who once relied on your wounded version may still speak your name. They may still feel the absence. They may still wonder what changed. But they no longer have access. Not because you built walls, but because you closed the door and walked into your own life. And this is the part Jung considered the true achievement. You are no longer defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you chose to become. You did not become harder. You became clearer. You did not become colder. You became boundaried. You did not lose your heart. You placed it somewhere safe. This is not the end of your story. It is the end of a chapter that required pain to teach you truth. What comes next will not be written in reaction. It will be written in authorship. And that is why those who only knew you broken will never understand you now. Not because you became unreachable, but because you finally reached yourself.